ReefDVMs can at you with using the freeze dryer again, but this time we have kind of a different purpose. We're freeze drying for our baby food. Every winter we get a plethora of squash, and a lot of it we mash down, cook down, and freeze just traditionally. But sometimes we freeze dry it after we cook it, and that's what we're going to show you here. So we've taken some butternut squash that are starting to go bad, and we're cooking them at 350 degrees for about an hour and a half, maybe hour and 45 minutes. Then my daughter is cutting them open. She's going to take the seeds out of them here. And then we're going to put that good hot squash into the red bowl, and we're going to fill that bowl up. Once we get that bowl filled up, you know, there's a lot of different options we can do with cooked squash. Number one, you could eat it, you know, right then and there. A little bit of marshmallow, a little bit of brown sugar, and go for it. Two, we could bag it up into Ziplocs and freeze it for the winter. Three, we can put it on dehydrator trays and make like a squash roll-up. But today what we're going to do is we're actually going to freeze dry it. We're going to freeze dry it and then break it down into a powder. And once it's broken down into a powder, it'll keep for years for us. And that powder we can certainly use for baking cookies, making cakes, and in the situation that we want to use here on the farm with the growing young family, we want to use it for baby food. And depending upon how much water you mix back in with it, depends upon how thick it gets. It can go back to the consistency of the squash like you'd have at a traditional meal, or you can make it more into a liquid for the younger. Either way, it's a great nutritious product. When baby food right now in our neck of the woods costs about, for an organic or natural jar of it, probably about $3. Granted, you can buy some cheap crap for about $1 something, but you know what? We're not going to feed that to our kids, especially on our homestead. So this is basically how we make a lot of our baby food. So in here you've got the seeds, and right here you've got the squash. This squash can be all sorts of different types. Sometimes it's butternut, sometimes it's buttercup, sometimes it's an acorn. I find acorn kind of the hardest to work with. As you can see, once we're done cooking it, it kind of gets a little bit hard and stiff. Doesn't matter. Just take a big old scoop of this. It takes about 3 scoops for us. We throw it on top of our freeze dryer trays. You'll see we've got the silicone pads down. It just makes it easier for us to get it up when we want to get it up. And then we'll put it in the harvest rate freeze dryer. I'm going to say it probably takes squash like this, which is not very wet, probably about 30 hours to get done. You certainly can shorten that if you took these trays and froze them in your freezer for a while first. But I don't have time to do that. I'm just going to throw 5 of these trays together, kind of pat it out, flatten it out, and I'm going to throw it into the freeze dryer and get it going. I would say that 5 trays probably makes at least a strong quart of powder. You might be able to get a little more than that depending upon how thick you make it. I suppose if you filled these trays right to the 1-inch line, you'd probably get 2 quarts. I'm not quite going through that effort. I'm just going to fill it to this level here where it's kind of like a cake frosting. And then I'm going to head out to the freeze dryer with the 5 trays. Load the 5 trays into the freeze dryer. We're going to shut the vent on the freeze dryer. We're going to put the door insulation circle in, and then make sure I've got a good door seal, and I'm just going to fire it up and go. On my freeze dryer, I change the oil every time it finishes when the oil's hot. So I've already got that all done. So my pump's got fresh oil in it, and it's been working great. I like to kind of pull this out a little bit just before I shut the door to make sure I get a perfect seal, and I like to make sure that black rubber is completely wiped because the seal is very important on these. I'll get this thing started, and we'll get going on it. As the freeze dryer, as you can see, is complete. We've been taking a little time to get to it, so I think this one says it's been going for like 47 hours. I got a little behind, and we didn't get to it right away, so it ran a little longer than I wanted to as far as waiting, but it's nice and cold inside. Nothing's wrong with the squash. I probably should have set a timer to make sure I get out here and get it checked right away. So I guess it took a little longer than 30 hours this time, but this is what it comes out like. It's completely light. It's dry. It's just like an air-filled cookie. You can see the whole thing comes up. And what my daughter's here going to do is she's going to break it into pieces. Now you could store it just like this, folks. There's nothing wrong with just putting this in, you know, like a vacuum seal bag with an oxygen packet, and it would keep for years. But that's not how we do this. We're going to go through this, you know, I wouldn't say fairly rapidly, but certainly within the next 6 months, it'll all get used up. And when we make baby food, it's hard to work with it in these chunks. It just doesn't work. So what we do is we're going to throw it in the Vitamix real quick. It's just dry and it's light. We're not adding any water or anything to it at this point. We're just going to make it into powder. Powder stores easier for us, and powder is a lot easier to measure out a set amount when a kid wants to make baby food for their little brother. So grind it up quick. As you can see, it doesn't take long. Just powderizes it back into kind of a dust. And then we're going to basically dump it into this green bowl. And once I fill the green bowl up, I'll throw it into a quart jar with a lid with a little oxygen thing in it. And I'll throw it in the pantry. And we'll have a jar of this ready to go. So that is how we make the baby food with the freeze dryer. Now, for sake of argument, we need to make some baby food right now anyways. So I'm going to show you how we make it. So we take a couple tablespoons. Now, granted, you may not want to use 2 tablespoons if your baby's not that big of an eater at this point. And then we just take some water and we put it together, kind of like a slurry. And I find that typically it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you use 2 tablespoons of squash, it's about 4 tablespoons of water. And then you just mix it up. And if you want it runnier than this, just add a little bit more water, folks. It actually tastes very, very good. Now, in this situation, it is not hot, so the babies like it. Now, you can warm this if you wanted to, if they wanted it warm. But this is just room temperature. The water is not, you know, cold, and it's not hot, so it's good to go. This is how we make squash baby food on the farm. This powder in this green tub, like I said, will last years in the pantry, and it'll supply us with what we need, and we won't have to buy baby food. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and follow our Homestead channel, folks. We appreciate it.